Okay, today I'm going to be showing you a simple lick that when you learn it in 3 different places on the fretboard, it will basically unlock everything for you. We're going to be going through 3 different levels of theory, starting with very easy and going with slightly increasing difficulty. I think you'll be able to follow it just fine. I did a lick a few years ago that was a little bit similar. I'm building on that today. Since that time, I've been focusing on the 3-minute guitar lick series. If you haven't seen those videos, I'll link them at the end. In those, I take famous licks from songs that you know and love and show you how you can incorporate those into your toolkit. For today, we're going to be in the key of C, just to keep it super simple. I went descending there at the beginning. I'm going to go ascending here for the breakdown because most people are familiar with the first position. So there's your first position C chord. The 4 chord in the key of C is an F, and the 5 chord in the key of C is a G. This is essentially, you can think of it as a 5-4-1 progression. So again, G, F, C. Returning from the 5 chord back to home, back to the 1 chord. All right, so to do that, we started off with this shape of a G chord. Okay, in the Cage system, C-A-G-E-D, it's known as the E shape, right? If you play just the top 4 strings and you add this note with your pinky on the 2nd string at the 5th fret, that is the 6th interval in the G chord, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you go from a G major to a G6. You'll hear that in rockabilly a lot. And then F to F6. And back to C. So how did we spice that up a little bit? Well, we spiced it up by first just playing the top 3 strings, sliding from the F6 to the G6 and back, and then playing 4-3-2. So it sounded like you played 4 chords when you were really only playing 2. You were playing the G6 and the F6, but because you played 3-2-1 and then 4-3-2, it sounded like 4 different chords instead of really just 2 chords. So that's sort of tip number 1. You can always break up chords and play pieces of them, and it'll make your playing sound more complex and more sophisticated, right? So that's sort of theory level 1, really basic G6, F6 back to C. Okay, I'm going to take you through the other 2 chord shapes before we go to levels 2 and 3 of the theory of this. Okay, so this is your C shape of a C chord, and if we go up here, we have, right, the A shape of a C chord. If we played it here, we could play it here in this inversion, but the core of it is that C major triad at the 5th fret, right? So let's find our next G chord up here. Well, that would be the D shape of a G chord, right? There's your D shape of a G chord up there at the 7th fret. If we extended it, you'd see that it looks just like a C chord. And I've mentioned in many, many other videos that the C and D shape from the Cage system are essentially the same shape. They share this fundamental piece, which is what we mostly play, the top 3 strings, right? So how do we turn that into a G6? Well, you saw that we went like that. So the G6 up here is like that. So we've got 9, 9, 8, 7. you'll see that that looks just like an E minor chord. Well, it does for a good reason that we'll come back to here in a minute. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to play the top 3 strings for the slide, and then 4, 3, 2, and then come down to our 1. So again, F6 to G6, back to F6, G6, F6, C major. Where's our next C shape? Oh, it's up here. And you should know that's the E shape. And then what's our closest G chord to that? Well, that would be our A shape of the G chord, right? How do we turn that into a G6? You play the top 3 strings. You might be thinking, oh, that looks a lot like an E minor. Well, again, that's going to become clear here in a minute. So we go down 2 frets, we have our F6, do our slide on the top 3 strings, and then G6, F6 to our C major of the E shape. So those are our 3 primary chord shapes. This would be the E shape, this would be the A shape, and this would be the C or D shape, right? Because again, the octave of that is up here, and it looks like that, but again, the top 3 of it is a D shape, right? All right, so theory level 1 again was G6, F6, C. Theory level 2 is, oh, that looks like an E minor chord. That looked like an E minor chord. That looked like an E minor chord. Why is he calling it G6? Well, because the 6th scale tone, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in every key is the relative minor. So in G major, the relative minor is E minor. And it also happens to be the 6th degree of the scale. So anytime you're playing a G6, you're playing an E minor. Anytime you're playing a F6, oh, you're thinking, oh, that does look like a D minor. That's right, that's my D minor there. Oh, and when we were here, right, that looked like just like a D minor. And oh, and I know this is a D minor of the E shape. This is a D minor of the A minor shape, right? And this is a D minor of the D minor shape. So, we really went E minor, D minor, C, if you want to think of it that way. Right? Think of your, I call it the My Sweet Lord. Anytime you can play 2 chords and it sounds like the beginning of My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, like C to A minor, then you've found the relative minor of that key. Right, G to E minor, which is what we did up here. All right, third and last theory level. When you have this 6th chord and you go down 2 frets, you are actually also making the 9th chord of that key. So again, if we're talking about the G scale, we know we have a G6 here. If we go down 2 frets, that is actually also a G9. And you're thinking, wait a minute, you just told me this was a D minor. Before that, you told me it was an F6. Yes, all of the above. So this chord right here, it's an F6, it's a D minor, it's also a G9. Why is it a G9? Well, we have an F note, which is the dominant 7 in the key of G. We have the 5 in the key of G, which is a D. We have the A note, which is the 9. And we've got the F again, the 7. So the root is implied. But you can see it much easier up here when we look at these shapes. Remember, we just played the top 3 strings at 12 and 10. Well, if you make this chord shape which you probably should recognize as your B9, right? You know this B7 shape. The B9 is just laying that finger down over those 3 strings. It's that same shape. If we bring that up to the 10th fret, right, that's a bluesy chord that you'll hear in Stevie Ray Vaughan and lots of blues music. Well, that's a G9. And look at the top 3 strings. It's exactly what we were calling a D minor or an F6. So the takeaway is anytime, it doesn't matter what key you're in, we're talking about a G chord at the moment. If you're playing this A-shaped chord, again, this is your A shape, we're bringing it up to the 10th fret. Remember that the heart of that shape is that triad, that A-shaped triad. On the 12th fret, it is a G major triad. Anytime you have that, you have a G6 right underneath it on the top 3 strings, and then going down 2 frets, you have the top of your G9. And that's used all the time for riffs and fills. And again, you have it there, and so 3 levels of theory here today. You learned how to make a 6 chord. You learned that the 6th degree of the scale is the relative minor, so that the 6th chord is also that relative minor chord. And then you learned that if you go down 2 frets from that shape, you will have the 9 chord. So again, G major, G6, which is also an E minor, and then G9, which in this case is also an F6 or a D minor. So there's all kinds of things that this opens up if you take this and transpose it into other keys. We just did C, going from the 5 to the 4 to the 1 in the key of C. Take that C chord and now make that the 5. So now we have C6 down to B flat 6, down to F, and work that through. Do that in a bunch of different keys and you'll realize, wow, now I know the whole fretboard. All right, I hope that was helpful today. I know it was a little bit long. If you want things that are shorter, check out my 3-minute guitar lick series. And thanks as always for joining me. I'll see you next time.